Encounter is brought to you by the Broome County Council of Churches, where we connect compassion with needs as we inspire growth with dignity. You'll find us in special places throughout the community. For those who remain hungry, we provide meals. For those who are challenged, we build wheelchair ramps. We comfort those who are ill, minister to those who are confined, and we remain an advocate for change and understanding on behalf of every element of our community. Connect and inspire. Encounter the Broome County Council of Churches.
Hello all, and welcome to Encounter, a program of Broome County Council of Churches. It's a place where community members and people of faith get together and talk about fabulous topics that affect us all. I am Alicia Dixon-Garrard, and I'm very glad to welcome the Reverend Rachel Helgeson with us today. This show is so meaningful for me today because I am Rachel's replacement. Rachel, you are probably very familiar with, was a host of Encounter as well, and now she has transitioned to some other things, and so I get the wonderful opportunity of trying to fill in her very big shoes. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what she's up to these days. But first, let me ask, anything new going on in the new year, just for fun?
Just for fun.
Just for fun. What's going on?
Well, we just had Epiphany at my congregation, and one of the things that we do is this thing called Star Words, not Star Wars, Star Words. I usually lead this at my congregation, but I didn't lead it this time. I actually let other people sort of choose what they were going to do. And one of my colleagues sent me a star word, and it was center. And so that's my word for the year, is to see where God is calling me to be centered. So I'm curious where that's going to go.
I love that.
Yeah.
I had never heard of that before, but that is so great for Epiphany.
Yeah.
And a lot of people do kind of choose a word for the new year to kind of engage themselves in a new way. I think I'm going to steal that.
Yeah, go ahead. I think somebody else gave me the idea, so it's not my idea by any sense of the stretch of imagination. So yeah. Cool.
Star word center.
Do you see how hard that is?
Yes. Particularly if you are a Star Wars fan.
Right.
You know? So the other thing new that you're doing is the Director of Chaplaincy through the Broome County Council of Churches. So kind of tell us a little bit, what exactly is a chaplain?
Yeah, good question. So you know that I'm ordained in the Presbyterian Church USA, but to be a chaplain, that's not necessarily how everybody is commissioned, I guess, for lack of a better word. But chaplains serve in a lot of different contexts. The context that I'm serving in is in the hospital system at UHS through the Broome County Council of Churches. The thing that's been really interesting to me, though, is that the other chaplains I serve with are hired through different organizations. So the lead chaplain, Bill, he is actually hired through UHS. He is also a registered nurse. And he does some pretty specialized nursing stuff.
Wow.
So he's been at the hospital system for a long time and knows a lot of people through that context, but he's been ordained through the Catholic Church as a deacon. And so he's full-time serving as a chaplain at the hospital, and also helps fill in with the nurses as needed. So very specialized.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. Then there's 3 other chaplains who have been hired through the Diocese of Syracuse, through the Catholic Church, and they are all deacons as well. And they each have their own special gifts. A number of them would say that they wouldn't like being in a context like this to be able to talk in front of people, but they're really amazing listeners. One, I think, is a professor and also does this. Another one is an engineer.
Wow.
And has started and is working, like part-time as a chaplain. And another one, he just seems to know everybody in the area. So if I ever have a question about anybody knowing anybody, he's lived here his whole life and has generations of families. And so it's been interesting. I am the only, if you're listening and paying attention, I'm the only Protestant.
Yes.
There's one other volunteer Protestant, but I'm the only Protestant that's on staff. So that's been interesting. And also I'm the only female on staff too. So that's also brought a different perspective
Right.
as well.
Right. It kind of seems like it rounds out the team a little bit.
Yeah, I guess so.
That's what we're going to say.
But it's been good. I've had really great conversations with the other chaplains. But also just the first few weeks, I shadowed and listened, because everybody has their own way of doing things. So I just thought it was really funny that you were like, oh, I'm filling big shoes. And I was like, I would say the same. Like, Alicia, you have such a big personality, but also able to like see into what's happening. So so it's a wonderful thing, I think, that I get to have this conversation with you about something else that I'm doing, but also to see you in this role, because I see you this way anyway. So as a friend and a colleague. So
thank you. Excuse us while we fangirl. Thank you. Yeah, Rachel is a colleague and a friend, and yeah, you're fabulous. You're fabulous. So is a chaplain the same then as a pastor?
Yes and no. I am a pastor of a church. As you know, I work at Northminster Presbyterian Church as their head pastor. So that means that I am preaching and teaching, and I do pastoral care. And that's the part, I guess, maybe where there's some similarities, right?
Right.
Being a chaplain, you do pastoral care, you sit with people, you talk with people, and I do that in my church. But for a chaplain, there is more, that's the emphasis, is sitting with people, being with people. If I teach, it's really because I'm trying to create a group effort where they're together, caring for each other. So it's not the same as like me telling them something. It's about us being on a journey together in pastoral care. Also, I don't know how the hospital feels about this, but you know that I have a background in music, so
yes.
I've already made a splash with that. Meaning, in the chaplain's office at Binghamton General, I was playing music, and there was a little like, what's going on? Why is there music being played? Because I don't know the history of that, but I do know, but at least for a while, there hasn't been music played in that office. And right across from that office is is one of the break rooms for staff, and there's another break room down the hallway, and there's some administrative offices along the way. So it was a change of pace for that hall, but me being me, you know, somebody asked me about it, and I smiled and was like, I'm so glad to meet you. I'm Rachel, and this is part of my calling here, is to share music with you. And so so I don't know that that's really what they were expecting out of the chaplain, but that's what they're getting.
Yes. Well, it's good to have this conversation because many people don't know what chaplains do. And you're right that there's some overlap with pastoral care, but it's not quite the same. You really are kind of there to listen and journey, and not so much indoctrinate.
Right, exactly.
You know, not so much that, but to journey with people who oftentimes are in the hospital because they've had a crisis.
Exactly.
So you're there to walk with them and kind of be that centering presence, your word there, you know, through the crises. Yeah, that's kind of what you're there for. And to sing, it's been said, is to pray twice. So maybe you could say, hey, I'm just praying twice for these people that I'm, you know, called to minister to here.
That's a good observation.
Yeah.
That's a really good observation. That's true. We do talk about, I mean, the Psalms are all filled with music. We don't talk about that because we read them, right?
But they were actually sung.
They were sung, and their prayers.
Right, back in the day.
Wow, good observation.
Yeah.
So there's also a chapel that's next door to that office. So you hit on a good thing too, is that in my role for my Northminster, I'm grounded as being a Presbyterian pastor. But as a chaplain, I am not limited to just Presbyterians or Protestants.
Right.
My work's a lot more interfaith work. Whoever just needs someone, a chaplain, to be present with them. It doesn't matter what my faith background is. It's just that they know that I do have a faith background, and they know that I'm the chaplain, and I'm there to be present with them on that journey. So it's really humbling, honestly.
Yes.
Because it opens up some deeper conversations, and conversations I wouldn't necessarily have as my role as a pastor, not that I don't have deep conversations there too, but they're different because it's coming from a different perspective.
Right.
And you're right, a number of the folks that I have visited with are in some sort of trauma. If you're in the hospital, you're not there because you want to be there usually. So the one of the security guards actually said to me, I thought this was beautiful. She was, when she took my picture, she said, you know, I want you to be smiling because we all are still wearing masks at the hospital. And she's like, I want your picture to be smiling because she's like, anyone who comes through these doors, the reason that they're here, they're already apprehensive.
Right.
And so she's like,
Exactly.
they can't see your face, so if they can see your badge that you're smiling and full of joy, no matter what role you have, whether, you know, as a chaplain, a nurse, a staff member, a doctor, whatever, that they see this presence of people caring for them and having joy about it. It's really stuck with me, like to think that somebody who's not a chaplain or not in a, like, to say like something that's very much a core of their,
I'm impressed with that. That's a very good observation on her part.
Yeah.
That is significant, that people want to feel like you're approachable. And I think the deep conversations probably come from the fact that people are in a very vulnerable state.
Absolutely.
So sometimes when you're in that vulnerable state, you're a bit more open and honest, and even sometimes more with a stranger than with a family member at times.
Right.
So you're able to kind of get to that place of deep conversation.
Yeah, it's been beautiful. There's some people I only see once, you know, that have asked for a chaplain visit, which you can do. You can always ask for a chaplain visit. There's always a chaplain on staff, and there's always a chaplain who's on call. So if there's a deep emergency and it's off like our regular hours during the daytime, all you have to do is contact a nurse and say, you know, I really need to see a chaplain, and they will contact the chaplain's office. It depends on who's on call at that time, but somebody will come.
That's good to know. I didn't know that.
Yeah. I'm actually doing my first on-call week at the end of January, so so that'll be a first for me since seminary. So
Wow. So the whole interesting thing, one of the things you brought up is the fact that you get to go outside of just being specifically Protestant and Presbyterian and how you serve people, because all kinds come into the hospital, those who are Protestant or Catholic or Jewish or Muslim or, you know, even Hindu or Buddhist or no faith at all.
Right.
So can someone who feels like they have no sort of spiritual expression still talk with you if they just wanted to talk with someone?
Absolutely. And we, as chaplains, we go in saying that, like, we're here for you on where you are in this space, and if you just need somebody just to sit and listen and be present with you, that's part of what we're here for. I've had some really funny conversations with people that just needed a good laugh, you know. If someone wants to pray, that we certainly will ask, but we don't. That's not a requirement or something that is expected if they don't want that. So it's just basically where you are on your journey, you know, to be present with you. Even it's helpful to know that there's a chapel in both Binghamton General and in Wilson. In Wilson, it's in the new area where they're considering the main area. There's a chapel there. They've updated the lighting, and but there's interfaith materials that are available. So whether you're Christian, Jewish, Muslim, someone who's spiritual, Buddhist, Hindu, there's Islam, from Muslim faith, there's things that are available. I know that at General, because that's where I spend more of my time, we do have yarmulkes that are available.
Oh, great.
During Advent, we had prayer books for those who are Christian. We have a mat that's out and available. So it's just been a really beautiful and wonderful thing to be able to have an interfaith space, and I'm not sure that everybody knows that that's available to them, to just to have quiet time and be able to sit and use it the way that they need to use it.
Right. And I think many of us, we probably get used to being in our own corner of the world. We may only know the faith that we grew up with, and we may not know a lot about other faiths, but as a chaplain, I think that's part of your responsibility, because, you know, hospitals are public services, our taxes pay for them, so anybody who lives local can walk in and has the same rights and privileges as everybody else, regardless of background, religion, or creed, race or gender, and all those things. So it's one of the things you probably have to train for. What are some of the other trainings that chaplains have to go through?
Yeah, so I did this thing called CPE, which is Clinical Pastoral Experience in Seminary. It's pretty intense. They do a lot of deep diving into who you are and what you're about and what your own things are in ministry and in your regular life. If you really want to do a deep dive, it's great. You could probably do this at Syracuse, because Syracuse Hospital has a chaplaincy training program, but it's intense. They encourage you to be on call more often, which means that you're there probably every other week, doing some sort of on-call night visits. And the other thing you have to do is you have groups. You go in and visit people, but we have to do these things called verbatims, which basically you evaluate the interaction you had, and it's also to get somebody else who wasn't in that interaction to see what did you do well,
right?
And where are growing edges, and what are some of your own biases, because we all have implicit bias. We all grow up with our own things that we do, the ways that we have learned to live life. But if you're in a hospital, you have to be open to where people are on their journey. So it really is sort of a checking point to say, okay, what did you do well? What can you improve on? And I actually was hired while I was in seminary for almost 2 years to work on the mental health unit. So, which was really life-giving for me, and I see that now circling back in the work that I'm doing now, because there's, in general, at Binghamton General, there are psychiatric facilities, and I know for some people that seems scary. But it's not for me. I see people are people.
Right.
And we all have to see each other as people. From my own tradition, we see the image of God in everyone.
Yes.
And so for me, it doesn't seem so scary, but I can also understand, if you're unfamiliar with it, or it's not where your comfort level is, that could feel like a complicated place. But but I just would remind folks that people are people and need to be seen as people at the core of who they are, and if they're there, that means that they're looking for help. So
that's a good thing that they're looking for help.
Yeah.
For those of you who may have just joined us, I'm Alicia Dixon-Garrard with Rachel Helgeson today, talking about what is chaplaincy on our Encounter program. And so share a little bit more about what have been some of the maybe special moments, some of the things you've enjoyed most. Yeah,
it's been, there's this one patient who has been there for a bit, and what has been really beautiful to me is how his eyes light up when I visit with him. We've had some very meaningful conversations, and that has been really pretty neat. The other thing that's been pretty cool too has been getting to know the staff at both hospitals. As we all know, the last few years have been complicated for anyone who works in healthcare.
Oh yeah, for sure.
A lot of them have been burned out. There's some younger folks who have joined because they see the need and are really passionate about it, but they also know that they're going into something that's complicated and new and different, and in a world where we've lived and are living through a pandemic.
Right.
So it's been really humbling sitting with staff members and just joking around and knowing that they have a deep heart for this, because why else would you stay in in that arena unless you really cared about the people that you're working with. So that's been surprisingly beautiful, and other interactions like that too. Yeah,
nice. I did a brief stint as a chaplain, and some of my most fond memories was those visits with people who maybe upon first glance you would not think necessarily you would establish a very good rapport with, because of generational difference, honestly. I was kind of one of the youngest people in the building, and you meet an 80-year-old and they're older, you think, oh, they're not going to really like this young female coming in trying to minister to them. And God just surprised me over and over again in those moments in which, kind of like you shared earlier, they often would reveal things that maybe they haven't said to anyone else. because you kind of are bringing as the chaplain the presence of the sacred as well.
Right.
And it kind of just creates this safe space to be with the divine and with someone who's part of the community of faith.
Absolutely. And you're right, it always does surprise me. It doesn't matter that I've now been doing it a little bit, it's still, there's something holy about that, just to be able to be like, oh, they don't see me as just this random human walking in the room. I'm the chaplain and I'm bringing something into this space, regardless of where their faith or lack of faith background is, whatever their journey is, that there's something special in this moment that we're sharing together. And it's pretty amazing. And as a female clergy person, it's also humbling, because I know that for some folks that their traditions struggle with female clergy, but for some reason chaplaincy opens up doors, even in those traditions, that to see that the divine can be present no matter what, which I wish we, on a side note, wish we could do that in the rest of the world, but take it where we can in the spaces we can.
Yes. And something you said about these fun moments with staff, I think that's significant to note. There's perhaps a misconception that people think the chaplain is only there for patients, but really you're the chaplain of the building. Whoever is there who may feel like they need that sort of care can come to you.
Absolutely. And it could be with something serious, or just needing to blow off some steam and just have a good laugh. That's chaplain's there to be present with, which is the fun part about it. I think it's easy to talk about this is the complicated stuff that chaplains do, but chaplains also like to joke around and make people smile. So, and it's humbling when you get to do that, just to be like, okay, I'm just present with you in this moment, and I don't know a lot of jobs where you can just hang out. Well, maybe the one that you're doing right now, but you get to hang out and talk with
people. But yours is better. You get paid to do it.
We love the Broome County Council of Churches.
Yes. Well, humor is also medicine for the soul.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And you kind of can be somewhat of an objective presence too. They may not be able to, as staff, do that with their boss or direct supervisor.
Right.
But people are people. We're human. We all have good days and bad days. And so again, that chaplain can be that presence there. And other facilities other than hospitals have chaplains too, right?
Oh yeah, just as you had mentioned earlier, I know that you had worked in a retirement community. Even with the Broome County Council of Churches, we have a chaplain who works in the jail system. His name is Chris. And there's actually across New York State, there are a number of chaplains who work in prison facilities. There are chaplains who work with homeless communities. When I was in Texas, I knew of a chaplain who did that, who helped minister to folks.
Amazing work. Wow.
Oh yeah, and it's beautiful work, but hard and complicated work. So chaplains, I even know of a chaplain, I think, on Broadway who works behind the scenes in Broadway. And I think U2 has a chaplain who travels with them. So just in case anybody's wondering, chaplains are a lot of places.
I've heard sports chaplains.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So chaplains are not just limited to hospitals and caring facilities. They are in other places too. It always frustrates me a little bit if you watch TV and you see people caring for someone, and then they're like, this is where the chaplain would have come in and left, and I was like, and they never come on the TV set, but I'm like, there might be someone in the background who's actually a chaplain for that set, so who knows? They're the unsung heroes.
Unsung heroes. Yeah, some police departments and some fire departments have them too. Yeah. So it's kind of, again, being that presence of the holy, the divine, a calming presence, a centering presence, witnessing people's story, journeying with them through crisis. It's a big call. It's a big calling, and it's a very humbling calling, as you were saying.
Yeah, I know the American Red Cross has a series of disaster-trained chaplains where they go into situations that, anytime you hear of house fires, a natural disaster, other disasters that are human-made, the Red Cross is there, and usually there is a chaplain available in those situations too. So if you ever find yourself in that situation, I hope you don't, but if you do, you can always ask the American Red Cross for a chaplain, and they can find that person to talk with you. If you have a house fire, you can ask for the chaplain from the fire department. They will come. I've met some of those folks locally, and they're again like very humble about what they do, but able to be present in those moments and understand it. So yeah, I think chaplaincy gets an underrated perspective.
Right.
I think partially because folks don't know it's available to them, but also because chaplains aren't really the ones to toot their own horns about what they're doing.
Yes.
So.
Which is a good thing.
Right.
It's a good thing. Yeah. It's good to be humble when doing the work of the Lord. And I remember we survived the 2011 flood, my husband and I, and there was a chaplain who kind of came in teams, and it was wonderful. It was wonderful to have someone being able to talk faith, faith in the midst of a crisis.
And sometimes people forget that ministers need ministers too.
Exactly, yes.
So if you have a minister or a chaplain, know that they need ministers and need to be ministered to too.
So actually not all facilities have chaplains, at least in terms of some of the retirement communities. What are some tips you would give families of how they could help care and kind of chaplaincy-like capacity for their loved ones?
So listen, don't put what you think first. I know it's such an easy thing to get stuck on, is to say, well, this is the way it needs to happen. And you're right, there are times when you have to do that, but give that person space to talk, because maybe why they're resisting might really be something a lot deeper that they're holding on to, that they just need to work through a little bit before they can get to the thing that they have to do. So listen. If you really feel that you need a person of faith to be present, if you have a community of faith, I would certainly let your faith leaders know. You cannot assume that they will know that your loved one is in care or in crisis because of HIPAA.
Right.
I think back in the old days, they used to be able to do that, to say, hey, so-and-so is here, come and check, or people would be able to go to the hospital and ask. They can't. Your faith leaders cannot do that because HIPAA prevents that from happening for good reason, for people's privacy. But if that is something that you need or want, then I would certainly let your faith community know. Or if you're looking for a faith community, ask your nurse and see if there's someone that they can recommend. And that's usually helpful too.
Thank you. I think those tips will be very helpful. And thank you all for tuning in today. We've been talking with Reverend Rachel Helgeson from the Broome County Council of Churches. She is the Director of Chaplaincy there. I'm Alicia Dixon-Garrard. Thank you for tuning in today.